Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Good morning. Let's see who's on. What a great night we had. We're going to have a great day. Crystal, you're there. I know this is one of your subjects that you're really passionate about. Good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you. I hope they're informative. I do my best. I put a good effort into it. Lavana, hello and welcome. Where to find a magnetic square for scissors, hook, needle that. Okay, so Lavana, I get mine. I'll put a link. I'm not going to think of where I get it, but it's called a needle nanny, Nanny, like Mary Poppins, a needle nanny. Someone was saying they were at Searsport and or Cushing, but when I was looking a couple months ago, they weren't available. At least they weren't in stock at either. But they might be. And meanwhile, before I post this video and I edit it after we close, I'll put a link to the place where I got mine because it is so strong. It is honestly like you could like hang from it with a metal hat on. It's incredibly strong and really useful. It holds both my hook and my scissors, which is, as you can imagine, incredible because the couch cushion is like the blob, it's like a greedy sponge that steals. Good morning, Penny. Yep, good one. Etsy, I'll still post a link all the same. Cece, good morning. Donna, good morning. And Alberta, I love doing this Canadian week. It's been so dense and rich with history. I'm really enjoying this week. Good morning, Heather. I hope that white wool is working out. I know you're getting going on your stockings. Good morning, Margaret. Donna, good morning. Oh, good. You're exchanging information about where everybody's from. That's great. That's a great way to hook up and find each other. Donna, Mom is there. Oh, I better have your thing this morning. Where did I put it? Don't play this game again. This is like my game, isn't it? My mom made this beautiful pattern. Uh-oh. I'll find it. It's got to be here. And I wanted to show it today because it was in my hand. Oh, Mama, what kind of a person have I become? I'll see if I can find it in a minute. A beautiful pattern I want to show you. Good morning, Tad. Good to see you. April. All right, let's see. Yesterday, I'm so sorry. Some of you were writing, but I got that weird big, it's not spam. It's just a message from YouTube in the middle of our chat. And I thought it was like the end. So I didn't realize people kept writing. And I'm sorry I missed it because as soon as I shut this off, I can't respond anymore. I can read until I begin to edit the video. And I usually edit the video pretty quickly because I'm always afraid it's going to just disappear. I know that is illogical and it's not how it works, but I have this ongoing fear that it's just going to go away and we won't be able to get it back. Kind of like the class last night that I forgot to record like an idiot. I'll get there in a second. Good morning, Amber, Penny, Sheila, MJC. Good morning from Indiana. Good morning, Carol. Good morning, Jess, Make and Knit. Yes, I know you. Woolen Life. Okay, great. There's a lot of people on this morning. I touched something bad, so let's leave it. CC, Linda, good morning, everybody. It's great to see everybody. It's great to see you chatting. Good morning, Catherine, and finding each other. That is so important, isn't it? I just want to remind you, if you are on Facebook, you can always use our page. It is not my page. It is not my brand. Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. You can always use that page to find each other and give a shout out. Hey, is anybody else in Alberta? Is anybody else in Iowa, Indiana? I know a lot of people live in remote places, but it is not impossible. And it's not even that unlikely that there is somebody somewhat near you that you can meet partway and visit. I also want to remind you that same Facebook page, you are more than welcome to use that to sell. Again, I use it to sell because I sell, but you are also welcome to use it to sell. The rule is one post a day, but that one post could have 100 items in it. So just know that you can do that. We did a really fun class last night, the Edward Sands Frost style stencil class again last night. It's a composition class. It's about making your own patterns, either for fun to do or for sales. So that was a really fun class. We had Ellen, who does a lot of videos herself that are wonderful and informative. Ellen was on, Brenda was on, Deborah was on, Anne and Doreen we had a lot of trouble with the computer, so we can always reschedule, but it was the fall edition. So the next one I'll put out will be kind of like the winter solstice edition with different stencils, same kinds of principles, but a little bit different with different ideas for compositions. It was super fun. And it made me think, at the end, we got chatting just a little bit because it was like 7 to 9. So it got late fast, and I think we're all feeling it. But we still chatted for a while, and it reminded me, it came up that these days it is really hard to find each other and to chat and to brainstorm. Now, I was lucky. I was able to do it with my mom this past weekend, and we came up with all kinds of great ideas. But it's been hard without being able to connect in person to brainstorm, and with a lot of things being closed, you don't have those moments of being in a shop or a gallery or a museum very often these days, where you would see something and it triggers a thought or an idea or some kind of creative thing that evolves into a fireball. That just doesn't happen right now because of circumstances. So unless you are like Andy Warhol and you can be inspired by things at the grocery store, like cans of Campbell's soup. I'm not making fun of it. Of course, he made a lot of money being inspired by soup. But, I was thinking we really should get back to that idea. Maybe grab a pen, because I have a bunch of ideas I'm going to shoot out there right now. Maybe we should get back to that idea of like once a week doing a Zoom call. I have the Zoom that I pay for, so there can be like 100, 150 people on Zoom. And maybe we could set up a subject once a week in place of coffee time, also maybe in the middle of the day or early in the afternoon, where we can all get on and just chat or listen and talk to each other and see each other. Because you know how the screen will pop up when you, you found Ellen on YouTube. Yeah, she's got a lot of great videos, really great videos. Ellen, you're in Connecticut too, right? She's usually on. I think she's also in Connecticut, quite close to me. But anyway, I was thinking, should we get back to that idea? Let's try to form that, because talking in person, talking in the first person, not just talking at you, but talking with you, I think is a great thing for getting going with ideas and inspiration and brainstorming. We could have a different subject each time and just brainstorm and snowball and throw ideas out and chat, or just listen, just sit and hook and listen. So yeah, I think so, Crystal. I think we need to connect a little bit more with each other. I love this format, and we will continue doing coffee time at least 4 times a week, coffee cocktail time. But I think if one day a week we can chat with each other, that'd be great. I had some other ideas that I wanted to bring out because we're so into history on this channel, and I know that so many of you are passionate about history, and that's why you tune in, and that's why we keep going in the direction we go. But I was thinking about a book idea that would involve all of us, and I just want to plant the seed in case it's something that you might become interested in. I was thinking about working on a book where all of us, no pressure, never pressure. But you know how when we were doing the episodes on the tavern signs, local taverns that are there still, used to be there, long gone, and the Magdalena Briner Ebby segments that we did, where we talked about Pennsylvania, and so much of her history is still there, local landmarks, a historical society that now owning all of her rugs that are known. I was thinking about that and thinking, what if, just file in the back of your head, what if we all who were interested looked into, maybe sent an email to the Historical Society, whether they're open or not, I bet you they'll answer. The Connecticut Historical Society answered me. So it maybe is a little bit slower, but again, back of the brain filing, the idea that maybe look into some place, a local historic house, the Historical Society, maybe an older person who you know is a rug hooker. Try to find a pattern like that represents where you're from, or is just a very old pattern that we don't see very often. And maybe together we could put together a book of the story of each of the rugs that we do. And you could always do it smaller than a full-size mat. You could always do it small. I do that a lot with mine so I can show you what it looks like hooked, and it's not full-size the way I would sell it. But maybe we could think about putting together a book that represents all of us, and Canada and the US and Olivia, Ireland. And maybe you can find either a local rug or a local design that could be worked into a rug. And I could work with you really closely, depending on how much you needed me, on the text part of it, like a nice paragraph that describes your project, the history of a rug, if it's a specific rug, the history of the person you got the design or the idea from. It could be a nice history compilation that represents the places that we're all from. So maybe let's think about that back of the mind as something we could work on for a New Year project. Because I would be willing to put a lot of work in that with writing and editing and doing all that stuff. If you wanted to find something that you could hook that would work in that context, I think it would make a great project and a great book. It would be something we could all be proud of. One more thing I was thinking about that you might want to file in the back of your head with making patterns and doing these Zoom classes about, composition. I was thinking, why don't we this year, and I will put this together if you just want to send images in. I would like to put out for us a print on demand book that will be available like on Amazon or whatever, that isn't printed. It's printed on demand, so it'll take like a week to come. But I'd like for everybody who's interested to contribute a pattern. Like if you're interested, contribute a design of your own, a drawing of your own that it would be sort of permissible for someone else to use for a rug. So we're giving up free patterns. I'll put a few patterns in myself, just ideas that if people flip through the book, they could either use it as one of those Zentangle books to color in, right? Because it'll be black and white line drawings, or it'll be okay to blow up the patterns and use them for hooked rugs, not for commercial sale, but to blow them up for you. If you like a bunch of designs that are in the rug that are by all of us, all of our own designs, then you can blow it up and make it and use it and have it at home, not for commercial use. But I thought that would be a good idea too, because it doubles as a coloring book. And that is something that we don't have to spend any money to output. I could just edit the thing, get it ready as a book, and then way before the holidays, it could be available as a print on demand. And you could use other people's patterns if you saw something you liked, or you could just use it as an inspiration or coloring book, relaxation book. I think that would be really fun. And again, it would represent our evolving group because, you know, there's almost 1,500 of us now in this group. And then the Facebook group has some different people, but another growing number. So it'd be nice to do something together for the holidays that represents everybody who wants to be represented. So don't worry that your design would not be good enough. Your design will be good enough. Your design will be great, right? There's a saying, you know, I'm not going to say a bad word, but there's a but for every seat. People always like different things, and it doesn't matter how good of an artist you are. An idea is an idea, and it's usually a good idea, especially if it's coming from you. So I want to return to our talk about Bluenose and Garrett. We are so deep into this Bluenose and Garrett thing. This is such a huge evolving story, and so much of this is not known. Still, even with all of the academic work that Suzanne and Hugh Conrod have done with this fantastic book, there's still so much. Thank you, Cece. Please give a thumbs up and subscribe. That helps me be visible on YouTube so other people can find me easily. They did so much great academic work here. It's truly unbelievable. The amount of time, research, and expense they went through to recover as much as they could from the Garrett factory in Nova Scotia is amazing. And of course, there's a lot of supplementary information. I've read a lot in other places too on the internet that predates this book and has come since this book. But it all fits together nicely and makes a lot of sense. So I'm returning to this book, and where we left off yesterday. So funny when we have a multi-episode, because it reminds me of like the 1980s when they used to have those serials. What did they call mini-series, right? And they were usually with like Richard Chamberlain, and it was like Shogun, or it was like my favorite one, Thornbirds. And they would do in yesterday's episode, you know, Father Ralph was on the beach being naughty with the girl and whatever. I feel like I'm doing that every time. In yesterday's episode, we were talking about Suzanne and Hugh being in the basement, this really dangerous circumstances of the basement of the old Garrett factory in Nova Scotia, New Glasgow, right? So they're in the basement of this thing, which is now like a rambling antique shop, and making great discoveries. And when we left off yesterday, they had found this dark cardboard container underneath a leaking sewage pipe, with a tiny little string holding it together that had not been opened for years and years and years. And inside it was filled with a huge amount of brown paper, like wrapping paper that people would have used in those days to wrap something. They wouldn't give you a plastic bag, of course, right? Like in the 19th century, they wrapped something in brown paper and you took it under your arm, or they sent it home to your house. Imagine if they did that now. I mean, they do that, but you have to pay for it now. They found a ton of miniature stencils that became known as the mystery rugs, because they couldn't understand why stencils that were 4x6 or smaller could be used. How could they be used with for rug printing, commercial printing, without some kind of extraordinary projection equipment, right? You just could not enlarge something this big to be bigger than something for a doll's house. And even then it would be quite, I love the Thornbirds too. Then it would be quite small anyway. But that is a mystery which seems not to be solved. How those particular designs, not as drawings, not the drawings that were found, the stencils that were found that were teeny tiny, how those could be used. Somebody wrote to me on this channel, right, on this video from yesterday, a possible idea that with traveling salesmen, traveling peddlers being what they were, like Edward Sands Frost, everything that you had for sale, you would keep in the saddlebags on your horse as you traveled. Maybe you had some kind of a hitch going, but probably not. And everything would be small. And she suggested maybe they were used by a traveling peddler. And I certainly don't know. And I can't say one way or another, but I would think that they wouldn't be used for that just because stencils are more fragile than drawings. And if you were showing something small as an example of something that you would later send, pay and then later provide, I don't think that they would use stencils because they're so much more likely to rip than just a plain picture. Somebody took a lot of time to cut these stencils with a really fine tool. And they seem to be unused. So that seems to remain a mystery. We're going to keep referring to those for the time being as the mystery rugs. Do you think they were trials so that they didn't waste? Why not? That's another great idea. The comment is, do you think they were trials? Like, do you think they just tried them out small on a rug to see how they came out? This actually came up last night in the composition class, not this particular thing, but we were talking about fads in rug design when, for example, there would be a very heavy border, like what these stencils look like, mostly border with absolutely no center, or maybe one flower or three flowers in the center, always an odd number, of course, or just a blank center. And then you would provide the image of your dog or your initials or the year or your last name. Otherwise, a lot of these early borders that we're talking about, especially the Garretts, are very border heavy with like little or no central motif, the early ones. So that could well be that they were just used to. The other thing is, you got me going now because you got me thinking. That's a really good thought. And this hasn't been developed with an answer yet, the idea of what are these mystery stencils for. But if you are right, and they were using these as trials, we do know that the math has been done on these, and each of the stencils had a few images for corners, borders, and designs. Each of them could do at least 100 combinations just with one stencil, just putting them in different places in different ways. It was extraordinary how many combinations you could come up with. So that is actually a brilliant idea, that they were using them small scale with the idea of drawing them in or inking them so that they could then, or powdering them, right? So that they could then figure out which of the designs were most successful using a combination. That is a great idea. That is something you should research if you want to, or we should develop that. That is a really good idea. Somebody needs to follow up on that. When I first got into punch needle embroidery, the examples were dollhouse rugs. Those stencils could be that. Absolutely, Amber. They could absolutely be that. We know that the Garretts were producing large commercial rugs, mostly matte, so larger than a dollhouse rug. But you never know. They must have been used for something because this was a painstaking project, cutting out hundreds of them. I'm going to show you a picture of them too, because they have a picture of them in this fantastic book. But let's keep thinking about it. I think we're really onto something here. So these were labeled the mystery patterns. And if they were somehow rug patterns, which has not been proved, in other words, we have not seen the motifs from these specific stencils used in rugs thus far, or at least when this book was published, because of course I'm not familiar with the entire catalog of the stencils, just the ones that are pictured in this book. It could be that rugs have been found since that use these stencils, and then they could, in theory, be absolutely the earliest commercial rug stencils being used earlier than Frost's. It's possible. So that's something that we can think about, and something that might be solved as time goes on and more things are found. Letters, scrapbooks. You can't imagine what we're about to find in this book. So anyway, I want to show you a picture. There's a lot of beautiful pictures in here that are just not on the internet. You've really got to get this book if you're interested. This is, which Garrett is that? That is John Garrett. So that is the son. John Garrett here working on designs. And you know what this is? This is another dear to my heart image here. This is a woman in the front window of a Halifax department store in the 1920s, hooking a rug from beginning to end. This is an amazing thing they used to do in old department stores. You know, I love these old department stores. They would often do a live demonstration in the window. I mean, they had many windows, but in one window would be devoted to like home. One window would be devoted to the antique store that they would have within the store. In this window, whatever department it was associated with, there was a week-long demonstration of this woman hooking this rug right in the window of the department store. I hope that's in focus. It actually took her less than a week. She was ahead of schedule, so she got it done in less than a week. What a great advertisement. People walking by and seeing that, seeing her work like that in the window. What a brilliant idea. So then we're talking about Claire Garrett. Now, I feel like somebody brought up Claire the other day. I'm wondering if it was Claire, that it was a friend of somebody on the thread. And again, as soon as I close the thread, I can't follow up with you or write. It's just the way YouTube is. So Claire Garrett, this is going to be a picture of her I'm going to show as a little girl. They're showing the Garrett building in this picture with bunting for a queen's visit. I'm assuming it's Queen Elizabeth II. And here's Claire Garrett with a little Scott Terrier right here. Could also be someone learning how to cut and design for them. That's true. That's true too. In what era would the woman in the window be doing this? It was the 1920s. So it was a recorded event. I'm pretty sure this is Eaton's. I'm having trouble finding my history of Eaton's department store. It's a really thick hardcover book, and I wonder if it's in there. I'll follow up with you in a future episode if it is. But this would have been a big event for them. I mean, this is something that was recorded and well known. This isn't like they would do cooking demonstrations and stuff in the department with the pots and pans and things like that. But this would have been something that would have drawn a lot of attention and probably would have also been in the newspaper. If you ever get spare time, look through your old newspapers and see if you can find relevant stuff. You might find things about rug hooking or window store demonstrations like this that are definitely going to be announced in the newspaper that nobody has recorded yet or put into a book or linked to that event. And again, that's all part of the history that we're all responsible for. If you find stuff like that, make sure you let us know. But this is that was little Claire Garrett holding up the Scottie Dog Rug. So she is the niece of Frank Garrett, who's the dad. And this picture is from the 1930s. Weirdly, Frank Garrett, right? So he's Frank Garrett is the one that was working at his dad's furniture store and liked the design creative part of it and sort of peeled away and ended up getting into rug design. He ended up taking that fateful trip to Boston to get some inspiration for designs. He probably, well, we know he picked up some Edward Sands Frost designs that they then sold in Canada as their own designs, which in those days it happened a lot and was, I'm not going to say it was okay, but it worked and it was done. Certainly not now. But interesting thing about Frank Garrett, he was actually, he did his school in the United States, like his school, elementary, college type levels. He was actually in the same class as our greatest American illustrator, Norman Rockwell. I mean, isn't that interesting? You know, it goes, we were talking about this in class last night too, about how important brainstorming is and being around other people who inspire you, because you do get these hornet's nests, these hives of talent. And it's not a coincidence. One person inspires the other person. Obviously, Norman Rockwell went on, despite his depression, despite a lot of personal issues, despite huge fires that destroyed so much of his work, he went on to be the greatest illustrator of all time. And do you know, side note, side fact, for the American audience today, Norman Rockwell, at the time of World War I, really wanted to enroll as a soldier. But when he went down to the drafting place in his town, they rejected him because he was underweight. He was too skinny. So he went home and he ate like a dozen bananas, and he went back in the morning and he was just over the weight limit. So they did accept him, but as an artist, not as a soldier. He was a military artist during World War I. And during World War II, he was a little bit of an older man, so he wouldn't have been an active anything at that point. But he did submit his, what most people consider masterpiece, his series of four, the four freedoms: freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. And that was modeled, the freedom of speech was modeled on Abraham Lincoln, which is his most famous. But anyway, when he submitted those four most important illustrations in American history, he was told by the War Department that they didn't want to use them because they wanted to hire, quote, a real artist to do the propaganda posters for the Second World War, propaganda effort. They ended up using them, but what a slap in the face, right? So when we think about art, and we talked about this last night too in the design class, there's a very fine line. There's no line between an illustrator and an artist. What makes you an illustrator is that it's who's buying your work. If a magazine is buying your work and all your work comes from children's books and magazines, you're called an illustrator. If all your work is going to galleries or you're being commissioned to do portraits for somebody, then you're a painter or an artist. But there really is no difference. So you can never sort of diminish the work of somebody and compartmentalize them as a whatever or whatever, because it just doesn't work that way in life. It certainly didn't work that way for Norman Rockwell, but he was in that class with Frank Garrett. And again, this is like, I'm going to stop with red herrings and sidelines, but like if you think about American Bloomsbury, the community of writers in Concord, right at the beginning of the 19th century, again, this is not a coincidence. Louisa May Alcott, Henry David Thoreau, Nathaniel Hawthorne. I mean, this is not a coincidence. They inspire each other. And this is why it's important for us, I think, to get together in person at least once a week on Zoom so we can share ideas and brainstorm, because you just never know what's going to come out of it. So moving on to the mystery patterns. Let me see what the next point of interest was here. So she's talking about these early patterns and the question of whether they could be the earliest commercial patterns. Since we don't know what they were for, that creates a big why, because they might not have been made as immediate rug patterns to be used then and there. The timeline's very close at this point, because if you remember, Edward Sands Frost, right, is 1868 that he begins. 1868 is the year that he notices his wife is struggling with design, and he takes off into the shed behind his house and uses the scrap tin that he happens to have to make stencils. So he uses what he's got. Not everybody will work with stencils, right? One of the Garretts will, the other Garrett won't. So everybody has a different method. But for Sands Frost, he has the tin. He's going to make the stencils. That's going to be his method of producing commercial designs. So that's 1868. But remember, 1867 is when Phileena Moxley opened her store in Lowell outside Boston, where she sold commercial patterns that were made from wood blocks with a little bit of metal sticking up. And she was stamping them with a blue rinse just to get the color onto the backing, and it worked great. So those two dates are very close together. And it's fair to say 67, 68, it's very hard to know which would actually be first, which idea was first, and it doesn't even matter. They were using different techniques. Teddy, I'm doing my thing, honey. Don't be screaming up and down the stairs, please. But we're talking about these stencils for the Garretts being more like 1850s. So this could be a real game changer in the timeline. Again, it doesn't matter. It's not a race, right? It's not a contest or a race. But it's interesting to think of those mystery stencils, because that would skewer the timeline of what we think of as the earliest commercial designs. So that is interesting. God, it's 57. There was an exhibition in Lunenburg County, Nova Scotia in 2006, 2007 called At Grandmother's Knee. Please let me know if you have anything on this exhibition or if you were there. It was an exhibit of more than 50 historic rug designs created from those original pen and ink drawings of the Garretts. Okay, so even though we have not found examples of these rugs, they were used to create new patterns in the 2000s, and over 50 of them were hooked by people and hung in this exhibit. This would be something. It's not available online right now. I can't find anything about it. So if you know anything about it, please chime in, because it would be great to share this information with each other. That wasn't that long ago. There should be some scrap of that out there. So, okay, so we're talking about, she talks a little bit about feed sack and how we've said this before with the introduction of burlap and getting sacking with whatever product you bought, especially if you lived in a rural area. That was a game changer for you, because it changed the size of the rugs that you could produce. Also changed the number of borders you could put on. Even with a commercial design, if you were copying someone else's, you could add border upon border, which you see heavy, heavy, heavy borders from this time, because you're now able to use a larger size backing to make a larger size rug, not just a hearth rug or a mat. So another thing that she turns up is so Claire Garrett, we just saw a picture of her as a little girl in the 1930s. She is the daughter of Cecil. Okay, so Cecil is the grandson, right? We talked about him yesterday. She's the daughter, and she found Cecil's scrapbook. And in the scrapbook, could they have been projected and traced? They could have been projected and traced, but the thing is, going back to the episode yesterday and the episode the day before, there doesn't seem to have been projection equipment found. Now, the Conrads took out all of the heavy equipment from here using their retirement money. They cleared out all the machinery that was there in the Garrett basement, and it's now at the North American Rug Hooking Museum in Canada. So that has not been mentioned at all in this book, because they fully understand that those tiny stencils are useless unless you can make them bigger. Always, right? You don't want to have to blow them up every single time you do a design. You're either projecting them and tracing them as you go. That would be the most obvious thing, but they're not saying that they ever found anything that resembled projection equipment. We know historically projection equipment existed, because we know in the earlier Victorian period that people, as an entertainment, would go to these magic lantern events that were like early movies, and they were using lanterns to project. So it existed, but it didn't exist at the Garretts. But then remember the commercial entrepreneur that was in the basement before, and the number of antique dealers that were in the basement before the Conrads. It's not impossible that they would have taken something that they didn't even know what it was, but it is the key to our rug hooking mystery. That could be the oldest commercial rugs ever. Somebody might have that sitting on a shelf, dusty somewhere in some shop, or somebody might have bought it as some kind of curiosity and have it on their mantle. But if that's the case, we haven't found it, and we haven't been able to put that together yet. So again, this is something to think about in clock, because it's something that will emerge sooner or later. Hopefully sooner, we will figure out how those tiny patterns were used. If they were projected, we should be able to figure that out. The information is there. It's just not part of our story yet. So in this scrapbook, I'm going to stop in a minute. We'll break and we'll finish this tomorrow night for cocktail night. Hopefully, because this is just a long story. And I love that we're contributing as we go along, because your ideas are helping me think too, and hopefully vice versa. It's so great that we're brainstorming this, because this is a true mystery, right? And this is a rug hooking mystery. There's not a lot of those. This is one we can really dig into together. I really appreciate all the comments, because it makes it more interesting for everybody. So Claire found this scrapbook, and in the scrapbook were a series of letters. They weren't particularly about rug hooking, but they were from the dad. And they show, and they're printed in this book. Another reason to get this book. They are such beautiful letters. And, you think of people in the 19th century as being very dour, having hard lives, and they just weren't. These letters are so funny. He signs them as Buzz, your loving, not lover. He wasn't quite that explicit. Your ever loving Buzz. Very funny lines, jokes about not wanting to leave things out because people will overindulge with eating candy and stuff. He talks about visiting stores and pharmacists where he's selling some other things. And he talks about the worms, the candy worms. He reminds his wife at home, Laura, to put away the candy worms because they'll be gone. The whole family's going to eat them before he gets back. He's selling candy worms. And just as a side note that I think is interesting, candy worms happen to be ribbon candy. So that's my brand, Ribbon Candy Hooking. I just thought that was a funny, curious tie, that the worms that he was selling on some of these trips where he goes like hundreds of miles, like 400 miles around Nova Scotia in a horse and buggy. His horse was called Charlie. I forget what his dog's name was. Maybe I'll remember tomorrow, but selling stuff. And the rugs were part of it, but it was a small part of it. They were selling all kinds of oils and essences. But let me leave you with this for now. This is a picture of those mystery stencils that we're talking about. And the biggest ones are 4x6. You see very Asian type designs. So, think on that overnight, see what that says to you in terms of, these look like the Dover copyright free books, but these are unique stencils. Look at the beautiful cross that's in between this one. So detailed. There are hundreds of these stencils in little packs sort of to go together as ideas. So let's think about that together. We'll come back to the mystery of this tomorrow, and we'll finish with the Garrett rugs. Hopefully I'll finish the book tonight. I had the class last night, but hopefully tonight is the night I can finish the book. Let's see if we can brainstorm, solve any mysteries, and I'll do a little more research before tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you in the morning. Take care. See what you can find out. Sherlock Holmes.